Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Beacon Church Online. We're so glad that you're here with us, and we're excited to have Chris Link joining us today from Sojourn Collegiate Ministries in Rhode Island to continue our 4 series. He has a lot of great wisdom to share with us, and we're excited to hear about it. We also want to continue to invite you to be a part of our ongoing opportunities that we have here to get involved with Beacon. Our Beacon Loves opportunity to donate to end 68 Hours of Hunger is going to be accessible every single week here at Beacon. This is a great way to serve and to love our community while you're already at the grocery store. You can drop off any donations on Sunday morning in our lobby, at the trailer, or pick up a donations list to keep. If you are new or you want to learn about Beacon, we have our Beacon Life coming up on Sunday, June 5th after the second service in the cafe. Here, we'll get a chance to answer any questions you might have about Beacon Loves, our groups, getting involved, or questions about what Beacon Church believes. Please join us for Beacon Life if you have any questions or just want to connect with your pastors. On Sunday, June 12th, we're going to be having one combined service outside in front of the YMCA, followed by our baptism celebration and cookout. Our one service that day will be at 10:30 and will be immediately followed by our baptisms and lunch. If you're interested in being baptized, please fill out the form linked in the description below. Thanks again for joining us online, and let's be encouraged by Chris Link sharing the message with us today. Have a great week, everybody.
Good morning, Beacon. It is great to see you. My name is Chris. Of course, Calvin is not here this morning, so I'm the first of 3 guest speakers. He's with his wife, getting some much-deserved time away. Last time I was here was your opening Sunday, was the very first Sunday that you were here, because the history with Beacon actually runs back quite a ways. It runs back nearly 20 years. It started a little bit like this right here. So if you can't tell, a few things have changed, but this is, on the end over here is Adam, and on the other end is me, and there's 4 of us guys that were thick as thieves, but we went to college together. And so we spent a lot of time together. We cared about things like Jack Johnson and really good country music. We cared about things like the beach, but we also developed a deep love for our future wives and families. We developed a deep love, of course, for Jesus and his church. And over the past 20 years, it's landed both of us in New England. So I've been in New England for a little over 13 years, and it was amazing to hear that Adam and his wife Trina and their kiddos were coming to New Hampshire. But I am in the best New England state that there is, which is Rhode Island, right? And so, no, we love coming to New Hampshire as well, but I drove up this morning. But I want to introduce you to my family as well. My family here, that is my wife of 14 years, Jesselyn, and then our 3 kiddos, 9, 6, and our little guy is 3. And so normally they would come with me to something like this, especially to see all of the Brucker kids. But something incredible and also very challenging and a little bit unexpected happened last weekend. We became foster certified as a family in late March and early April, something we've been passionate about for a long time, but the timing quite wasn't right for us. And so we got an emergency placement call last Saturday. And so at midnight, we had 2 more kiddos show up to the house. We had a 7-year-old and a 4-month-old show up to the house. And so this is a picture of the 4 older ones there. And so it has been one of those weeks. Have you ever had that week where you feel like you're chasing your tail? It's been a little bit like that. There's been a lot of learning, a lot of grace, a lot of pain, a lot of struggle. and a lot of really good celebrations and goodness that has come from it so far. But my wife is back at home, and a good friend, they're helping to take care of the kids and get them to the local church that we go to. And so they did not travel up with me today. But what landed us here in New England in the first place to move to Rhode Island was the same reason that Adam moved here, was to start good, local, healthy churches. And so over the past, like I said, we've been here for 13 years. For the last 13 years, we've been a part of 4 church plants in Rhode Island. And from that ministry, a campus ministry has emerged throughout New England, and it's called Sojourn Collegiate Ministries. And so I work for this college ministry, and we help college students discover God's dream for their life. It's a really good work, and what's really exciting, this week we're announcing something, so it just happens that everything aligns. But this week we're announcing that we're starting in New Hampshire for the very first time at UNH this fall, which is incredible. And so, yeah. So we've got an incredible staff team that will be moving here in the summer, and they'll be UNH this fall. And so if you are a college student, you know a college student, you have a college student, you wish you could go back to college, make sure you reach out to me. I'd love to get you connected. We're all over New England on different campuses, but we will be starting our first chapter at UNH this fall. And what's exciting about that is imagining what this could look like in the future. So 10 years ago is when we first started our first chapter in Rhode Island, and there was absolutely no one that we were connected to on the college campus. And just a few weeks ago, this was one of our events that we hosted on the college campus at University of Rhode Island. And so just imagine what could happen on the campuses in New Hampshire as well. And we're excited about what God will and continue to do in New Hampshire. And so this last year we had about 3,000 college students that were connected to on the college campus, and over half of them took steps either to accept Jesus or steps toward Jesus in their discipleship over the last year. And so God's doing a huge work, and Beacon will continue to be a big part of what's happening on the college campuses. So I'm excited to be able to be with you. But not everything looks like that picture. Not everything is absolutely perfect. This last spring, we had a heartbreak in our ministry. If I was here a year ago, I would be able to share a story of a dear friend named Frankie. And Frankie was a college student. She ended up being an All-American athlete in both soccer and softball, but was trying to figure out what her foundation and life were. And so over about a 6-year period that we were able to be a part of her life and her experience, she decided to start following Jesus, and she just loved life. She was a social worker, and because of following Jesus, that reimagined what that looked like for her. And she spent a year in Nairobi, Kenya, doing mission work and social work there. And she was preparing to go back long term, but she had a mental disorder, diagnosed personality disorder, and she struggled with depression and anxiety. And this spring, she took her life. Life is hard. And we're in a broken world. Aren't we? It doesn't take long for us to see that there is brokenness all around us, all the time. Sorry, this is fresh. So we live in a broken world. And so the question that we're asking inside of this broken world, what is God for? And more personally, what is Beacon for? And even more personally than that, what are you for? So what is God for in this broken world where there's so much brokenness around us? So I want to read the verse that is the launching pad for this entire series called For, from Matthew 25, verse 40. It says this: "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" Will you guys read that with me? I'm going to read it one more time. It's on the screen. "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the one of least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" So what does it look like to be for? What is God for in this midst? So the world is broken. We see that all around us. It doesn't take long. We can flip on the news station. We can tell a story about like what we did with Frankie. You can tell your story about your family or your workplace or your neighborhood. We understand that this world is just broken. Ever since Genesis chapter 3, when the world started unraveling of itself as the Christian narrative, that we understand that this world is just going to be broken. But most of our natural response, and if we're honest with ourselves, this is our natural response. This is not their natural response. This is our natural response, is to shove it down. That's why we say things like, stop crying to our kids. We also say things like, well, real men don't cry. Or don't be a baby, just get over it. We say these things because mourning and grief are uncomfortable. We don't know what to really do with this moment of brokenheartedness. How are we supposed to be for being broken in this broken world? And so Jesus is really clear with what his instruction is here. He says, don't shove it away. Don't put it away. It's not something that you just push down and get over. He says we need to embrace it. And the reason why we know this is several parts of his story, but in Matthew chapter 5 is one of the most clearest examples of what Jesus says. It's the Beatitudes. And so there's 9 different things that Jesus says that we're blessed for these things. Or another word that can be translated is we're happy if these things happen to us. And so it's a mixed bag of emotion here. It's an oxymoron saying, blessed are those who mourn. Happy are those who are sad? ? It doesn't seem like they go together. And he finishes out and he says, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Well, when Jesus makes this statement, he's saying it from a foundation that you and I really don't recognize with our current cultural context that we're at. So there's 2 foundational perspectives that Jesus has when he makes this statement that defines how can we be happy to be sad? How can we be blessed when we are to mourn? What does that look like? And so the very first foundational thing that Jesus understands is this: God doesn't expect me to be happy all of the time. Let me say it again. God does not expect me, does not expect you, does not expect us to be happy all of the time. We have this thing, and we really honor this in our culture, and it's called balance, right? We talk about a balanced work life. We talk about a balance inside of our family. We talk about balance with our diet. We talk about balance with working out. We talk about balance with our finances. This word we're infatuated with is balance. And so if you imagine riding a bike, we just want to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going, right? And so this idea of life is that you just keep moving. But this idea that Jesus had from his Jewish heritage was not about balance. It was about seasons. So if you think about it, it goes back to the very DNA of their culture, right? So every single week, what do they have? On the 7th day, you what? You rested, right? They had a Sabbath. Every single day, there was this reminder that there was a season of the work week. Every single year, they had celebrations that they came back to over and over and over again, where they stopped all of life to have a specific celebration for a specific reason because things were seasonal. They also had years. Every once in a while, they had a year where everything got reframed and repurposed. And so this idea of seasons was how they lived life. It wasn't about balance, that you just stayed on this course and you just made sure that everything had its own place. But it was that there were seasons that you engaged in certain activities and there's certain seasons you engaged in other activities. And so that's why Solomon says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, to frame this, in verse 1, he says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. What Jesus understood was there's a broken world around us, and the only natural way to respond to that at times is to grieve, is to mourn, is to be broken in that moment. God is for the brokenhearted. So what does God tell us to grieve? Because obviously, if you look, you can become so overwhelmed with the news because you could grieve absolutely everything, right? And so what are we actually supposed to grieve? And so there's a bigger list than this, but these are some of the things that God instructs us to grieve in these moments. The first one is losses. When bad things happen to me, maybe you lost a friend, maybe you lost a family member, maybe you lost a marriage, maybe you lost a job, maybe you lost finances, maybe you lost your health. There are things that we lose that are meant to be mourned, and God is clear about that. The second one are defeats. That is when good things don't happen to us. Good things that we expect to happen, but they don't happen to us. Maybe that's going to the doctor and expecting a clear cancer or bill of health and saying we've overcome cancer, and what do you actually get? You get the bad news that, hey, you're not through it yet. It came back, and it's not good news. Or maybe it's you were expecting to get that job promotion, and you didn't get that job promotion. And so there's lots of things that bring defeat to us, and that is meant to be mourned as well. The third thing is sins, my sins. The things that are habitual, things that we know, like we wish we could just wash ourselves of, but over and over again, because of different circumstances, we come back to these sins. They continue to drag us down. They continue to be weights on us that we so wish we could get away from, but habits and addictions are just all consuming in different areas of our lives, and we constantly find ourselves moving back towards some natural sin tendencies that we wish we could just move away from. And God says that is worth mourning. That is worth grieving. The fourth one is suffering. There are times in life where things are just hard. This last week in our life was really, really difficult at home. Watching children that have been processing through trauma as a 7-year-old is incredibly difficult to watch. And to watch how that spreads and impacts our family and what that looks like, there's a lot of processing and pain that happens to this moment. My 9-year-old, our oldest one, who's in 3rd grade, she has a friend down the street, and she just had open heart surgery. Thankfully, they caught the murmur and some different things that happened, but that family is going through such a difficult time. There's lots of suffering that happens to that, and God says, yeah, grieve that, mourn that. It's okay to be broken in that moment. And the fifth one is friends who are spiritually lost, people that are close to us, that we care about, and they've been introduced to this idea of Jesus and how he cares for them, but at the same time, they've pushed that off for one reason or another, and you watch how they are floundering in life, and they're trying to get out of their own pain and out of their own way, but at the same time, it's like, oh, I just can't pick up Jesus, and we grieve over their decision to push off Jesus, and so we mourn the fact that there's friends who are spiritually lost. So it's much healthier to see life in seasons. There are things to grieve about. And so Jesus understood this from the very beginning. When he made this statement, he understood there is a broken world, and the natural response to that is grieving, is emotion, is mourning, is to be broken. The second foundation he had in this was grief is essential for my health. Grief is essential for my health. If we don't grieve, we're not healthy. And we know people who don't grieve, and we know that they're not healthy. If you've experienced brokenness in the world and you do not grieve, there's two really plausible options here of why you don't grieve. Number one is you're out of touch with reality, right? Like you just have denial that like, no, everything's going to be okay. Everything like, no, it's really not that bad. It's really okay. I'm going to get over it. It's not a big deal. And so you're just out of touch with what is happening in reality. The second reason why you don't grieve is you're out of touch with yourself. You're out of touch with your own emotions, and you're detached from that. There's a quote I want you to, if you have a pen, write this down. If you have a phone, text it to a friend. It says this: there's no growth without change. There's no change without loss. There's no loss without pain, and no pain without grief. Grief changes who we are, and it's essential for our health. It's essential for what we need to process and grow in life. And so it's not this optional thing that we have around of us. It's saying, no, this is essential for our health. And so Jesus makes this statement, blessed are those who mourn. He understands there's a season for everything. And one of those seasons is to grieve. And there's also, it is essential for our health. And so the unhealthy response is simply this, is to repress it, which means that we unintentionally block it out, or we repress it or suppress it, which is consciously blocking it out, saying, I am not going to think about it. I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to put up the blinders, and I'm not going to process through this at all. And that's what King David, and King David was a central figure in the Old Testament, and he had several sin moments in his life. He was not perfect. He was known as the man after God's heart, but at the same time, he was blemished by sin and brokenness. And so in one of those moments, he was not willing to address the sin in his own life. This was his natural response. This is his journal that he penned about how he felt when he pushed off, when he suppressed this idea of addressing his own brokenness and grieving through it. In Psalm 32, verse 3, he said this, when I kept silent, my bones wasted away. My bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For night and day your hand was heavy on me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer. If we've ever suppressed or not been through the process of grieving before, we know this feeling. We know how much weight it takes for us. And so what does God ask of us? God asks of us to express it in healthy ways, to express our grief in healthy ways, and to confess it to trusted people. So God doesn't ask you to repress it or suppress it. He asks you to express it in healthy ways and to confess it with trusted people. And so when David was addressed by his friend and also the prophet Nathan and had held up the mirror for the first time and he was looking at his sin, there was adultery, there was murder. You should read in the Old Testament if you haven't before because it's epic. And so the story goes, and so when that mirror was held up to him, in verse 5 in chapter 32 of Psalm, he continues his journal and he says, then I, David, acknowledged my sin to God, to you, and did not cover up my iniquity or my sin, my brokenness. I said, I will confess my transgressions, my sins to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. He continues to go on and talking about how this weight was lifted off of his shoulders. When we grieve through something, we know it produces something good in us. It's good for our health. We understand this. And so that's what Jesus said. The foundation of his statement that blessed are those who mourn are two things. One, there's seasons for everything. There's a time to grieve because it's a broken world. The only natural way to respond to a broken world is through grief and through mourning. The second way is it's essential for our health. This is really important as well. Research has showed this over and over and over again. If we don't express our grief, our mourning, our brokenness, we get stuck in that moment. And so if you're a child and you never address the trauma that happens in your life, we know this scientifically and we know it evidentially in our own lives. You get stuck in that moment emotionally. Same way with our teens, same way in our 20s. If there's divorce, if there's job loss, if there's a parent that passes away, if there's some kind of trauma and pain that impacts our life, we get stuck in that moment. And so Jesus says, for your own health, you have to express it. You have to go through it. And so this is not something that we can get over. The pain in our own life is not something you can get over. It's not something you can go around it. You can't go under it. You can't go over it. You have to go through it. Right. You just have to go through pain, through the grieving process. And so the natural question is, well, how do you go through the natural grieving process? How do we do this? Because we've seen people go through it in really bad ways, right? Has anybody ever seen anybody go through a grieving process in a really bad way? I have, right? And it wrecks a lot of things around us. And so as followers of Jesus, as we place our foundation on Jesus, what does it look like for us to go through the grieving process? I've been in ministry for 20 years. I've had my fair share of challenges that have come my way. I've held hands while people passed away. I've seen cancer ravage lives. I've seen marriages fall apart. I've seen suicides. I've seen people go through really hard things. But at the same time, personally for us, we have not experienced an immense amount of brokenness in our own life. And so I'm by no means an expert in this case. And so what I want to share with you this morning are 6 signposts or 6 guides for us as followers to be able to be healthy, a healthy perspective about grieving. They're taken from a pastor out in California named Rick Warren. And Rick wrote this a year after his son took his own life. So his son was 27 years old and committed suicide. Him and his wife knew that if they were going to stay married, they needed to be unified inside of this, because statistics say that if your child takes their own life, most likely your relationship's going to end in divorce. And so they went through this intentional grieving process. And as they went through this intentional grieving process, he then on the heels of that said, okay, here's what I took away from it. Here's what we can learn from it. And so we're going off the expert who's went through a really tough time in life, painful experience in life, and at the same time ended on the other side in a really strong way. And so what are the 6 signposts that can help us get through brokenness together, brokenheartedness? The first one is this: God draws us close to himself. The first signpost is God draws us close to himself. I still remember it. It's so vivid in my mind. When I was in 7th grade, my grandfather passed away. I was the first grandparent that passed away. He was a World War II veteran, someone I looked up to and I cared for. But we were close enough with them that we would travel there every single weekend to go see them. And so through the process, as he got more and more sick, we spent more and more time up there. And I remember the day that my dad came into the room. I was sleeping, and he just wrapped me in his arms. He said, "Hey, your grandpa passed away." And he didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to say anything. He just had to wrap his arms around. And that's what God does for us in brokenness. Psalm 34, verse 18 says this: "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. As we grieve, as you mourn in our brokenness, God is close. He wraps his arms around us. The second signpost is this: God grieves with us. God grieves with us. So God created us in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. God created us in his image. And so that means the experience, the natural emotions that we have in life, God also has, because he imprinted them on us. And so he says when he sees the broken world over and over in Scripture, it says that he grieves it, he mourns it, he is brokenhearted about it. And so the same experience that we have is God grieves right alongside of us. I don't know if you've ever experienced this before, but when we go through grief, one of the most powerful things is when someone holds your hand and says, "Hey, I'm with you," right? And it's not like, "Hey, I'm with you and I'm going to be like happy dancing over here." Like, I'm just with you. And God says, "I am with you." I'm not a God that's far off, but I actually experience the same emotion and the same brokenness that you experience. In John 11, we see this firsthand. So Jesus, who is God wrapped in flesh. So if God was able to walk amongst us, which he did, and show us how do we live this life with one another, this is how we do it. And so Jesus lost a dear friend named Lazarus. He had passed away. Lazarus has passed away. And Jesus' response in John 11 was this, in verse 33. Jesus saw her weeping, the family members of Lazarus, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping. Jesus was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. I just want you, if you have your Bible, if you remember later, underline moved in spirit and troubled. Jesus was struggling in this moment. Jesus was trying to hold it together. And then he asks, "Where have you laid him? Where have you laid Lazarus?" And they said, "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And then Jesus wept. Shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. God is right alongside of us. He not only embraces us, but he understands us. He not only embraces us when we're grieving, as a loving father, a loving mother would do, but he grieves right alongside of us because he experiences the same emotions that we experience. That's the second signpost. God grieves with us. The third one is this: God gives us a church family. God gives us a church family. There's an old saying that says, a shared joy is doubled, right? Everyone loves a party. When I'm with friends and there's something to celebrate, man, it is super fun, right? And a shared grief or a shared sorrow is halved. So yesterday, hanging out with friends when the Bruins lost, man, that was tough. It would have been really fun to say, like, yeah, this was really good, and we celebrated it, but we all said, all right, we're going to hang up our hats, and we're going to wait for next year because they lost, right? And so there is this reality that shared joy is doubled, but also shared sorrow is halved. Healing comes in community. We know that. Healing comes in community, being with people. In Romans 12, verse 9, Paul shares this. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Listen to all of the love and the togetherness and the community. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice those who rejoice, and mourn with those that mourn. Being with people heals us. Being with people heals us. But this is really important. Some of our biggest scars in life also come with people saying the wrong things with really good intentions when we're grieving, when we're hurting, right? I think most of us have probably been in those places where someone says, or maybe we have said something, not meaning to say something that is offensive, but we say something that's offensive, or something is said to us offensive in this moment of grieving. And so let me give you two things real quick. Number one is never minimize someone else's pain. Never minimize someone else's pain. Saying, only if, or you still have this, or trying to make them feel better. It's okay. Pain is a natural reaction in life. Allow people to be in pain. When you're their community, never minimize someone else's pain. And the second one is never rush pain. Pain takes time. It takes time to be part of it. So allow it to happen. One of the best things that we can do for one another is simply to show up. This is called the pastoring of presence. Showing up with someone, not saying anything, not doing anything, just being together, listening, caring, loving. This last week I said it was really hard. It was really tiring. Some of the best things that happened, we had 3 different friends that unexpectedly dropped off meals to us. Man, that was awesome. They didn't come in and want to hang out. They didn't want to come in and be part of our dinner chaos and all of those things. They didn't want to figure it out for us. They just said, hey, here's dinner. And we said, thank you, because it's literally a lifeline right now as we're going through this chaos. One of the best things we can do is just show up and also provide a little bit of food. I know this time, the last 2 years have been a struggle for all of us in different ways, in unique ways, but one of the ways that we have a commonality is community has changed for us. Our friendships have changed. By the way, one of the hardest times to start a church, right? To gather together as a group of people. It's amazing to see what God has done through you all. And so if you're questioning, like, I don't even know who my people are, I don't even know what it looks like to have people right now or to have a community, you're in the right place. But I also want you to write down a reference for this. There's a really good book that was released called Find Your People by Jenny Allen. Find Your People. And this will push you. If you're like, I don't know where to start with finding my people and what that looks like, this book will help you push on that. So Find Your People by Jenny Allen. But the other encouragement is this community, this is what matters. My wife and I are part of a local church, and that community is our foundation of support and life and care and so many things, and it has to be. And so find ways to get connected and be part of a small group. The fourth signpost, God uses grief to help us grow. God uses grief to help us grow. There's a harsh reality. You don't have a choice about your pain. You don't have a choice about your pain. What you do have a choice for is how you respond to your pain. You don't have a choice about your pain, but you do have a choice with how you respond to your pain. So either you become bitter or you become better through the process. You become bitter or you can become better through the process. What we'll understand is God's more interested in your character than your comfort. When we're going through something really, really, really challenging, if we find purpose in it, we'll be able to get through it. If we find purpose in the pain, we'll be able to get through it. Listen to Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 17. He said this, "For our light and momentary troubles," we don't think they're light and they're momentary, but our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So what do? We fix our eyes on not what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. We have to find purpose in our pain, and God cares more about your character than your comfort. Have you become bitter or better? The fifth signpost is God gives us the hope of heaven. God gives us the hope of heaven. We've seen this firsthand. There's two types of grief. There's grief with hope, and there's grief with no hope. And because of Jesus, that is our foundation. We have hope beyond this life, beyond this circumstance, beyond this pain, beyond this brokenness. It says this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13. "Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope." And the last picture we get from John in Revelation chapter 21, God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. We have a perspective that is beyond what is right here in this moment. We have hope for something beyond our current pain. God gives us hope, the hope of heaven, the fifth signpost. And the last signpost is this: God uses our pain to help others. God uses our pain to help others. Don't waste a pain. Don't waste a pain. We often think that the world is so impressed with our prosperity, but the world's not impressed with how we handle our successes. They're actually impressed with how we handle our adversity. Our successes don't give us an opportunity with other people. Our suffering gives us an opportunity with other people. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2, Paul says, "But thanks be to God who always leads us as captives in Christ's triumphal procession and uses us," uses us to spread the aroma of the knowledge of him everywhere. God wants to use our suffering as an opportunity to reach others. God uses our pain to help others. Here's the truth and the reality to settle on this morning. Your greatest ministry will come out of your deepest hurt. Your greatest ministry will come out of your deepest hurt. The hardest thing that you have gone through or are going through, that will be the greatest opportunity for ministry. If you've lost someone to cancer, if you've been through divorce, if you've had problems with having children, if you've lost a job, if you've been through bankruptcy, if you've powered through addiction or are going through addiction, who better than to walk somebody else through this? This is what we call a wounded healer. That God will use you wounded. You don't have to be perfect. You are a wounded healer to walk someone else through this. God uses our pain to help others. So this morning, you're going to find yourself in one of two places. Either you need help, or you need to give help. And this room and our neighborhoods, our families, our workplaces, our community are filled with people in one of those two places. People that need help, or we need to give them help. So going back to Matthew 5, verse 4, when Jesus said, "Blessed, happy are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." The way they're comforted is through the wounded healer. God is for the brokenhearted. Beacon is for the brokenhearted. Will you be for the brokenhearted? Let's pray. God, this moment is heavy. It's good. We sit in this place of so much, it's just hard to grieve. It's hard to be broken. It's hard to allow ourselves to say, yeah, this world's hard. But God, we know that it's good. We know that you produce character and perseverance. We know that you produce something in us that allows us to be who you created to be. And all of that is held together with the glue of Jesus as our anchor. Thankful for this community and all the communities around the world that are doing this morning to uplift each other, to hold each other accountable, to love each other, just to show up in each other's lives. Father, I pray that that continues to be a healthy reality here. Thanks for Jesus. He holds the world together. Amen.